Okay. Hello everyone, and thanks for coming. Welcome to the first Sports and Tech Meetup of 2014. Good to see you. We have an awesome turnout, as always, and really excited to dig into innovations in ticketing. But before we do that, I want to give a big thanks to the people who helped put this together. First of all, huge thanks to the awesome folks from Orrick and Armstrong Brewing Co. for sponsoring and hosting the event. Big thanks to the people from Orrick, Larry Keynes, over by the beer and the sweater. Yeah, smart guy, obviously, and he was real helpful in terms of, it's hard to find an event space big enough for the crowd, but they came through, and as you can see, it's terrific. You guys probably already know Orrick, but Orrick's, whenever you hear conversations about the best startup law firms, it's always one of the ones mentioned, and we really appreciate the support. Also, a big thanks to Connie and Delia, wherever they are, for their help with the events. Next to Larry is Armstrong Brewing Co. They're giving a wave, and you obviously understand why we're thankful to them, but thanks for the support as well. And Ben and his team are back there. They're a nano brewery, I believe, and they're in South San Francisco, and I think they serve beer on Thursdays and Fridays, so it's definitely worth a visit. Finally, last few people, big thanks to Dave Collins from StubHub, who's filming over there. He's helpful with a lot of the different aspects of the event. And I'm not sure if Lyle Sturm from on CD made it, but he was really helpful in getting Kevin on the panel, so thanks for that. Last sort of few things of housekeeping. We're not going to do an event next month, but our event after that is going to be in March. And we're having a talk with Joe Lake of the Warriors, and then going to a game afterwards. That should be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, if you haven't bought tickets for that, they're already sold out. But I'm working with the people at the Warriors to try to get them to issue another 20 for us. So hopefully they'll do that soon. Yeah, definitely on StubHub. Yeah, and we're going to shoot to do an April event about investing in sports tech companies, and we have one or two pretty cool people already signed up for that. So you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. I just realized I should have been looking through Orrick, Armstrong Brewing Company, our speakers. Perfect. Alright, so we'll introduce these people, and then we're going to put the Twitter stream up here, so if you're Twitter inclined, tweet away. Alright, without further ado, I present our panel to you for innovations in sports ticketing. To my right, we have Ron Schneidermann. He is the co-founder of Liftopia, and I think he was the chief marketing officers for 9 years until this December. Before that, he was at Hotwire, and he's a fan of the 49ers, the Warriors, the A's, and all things UCLA. To his right is Kevin Blue. He's the senior director of athletics at Stanford University. He oversees all external business units, including ticketing, technology, and business strategy. And his favorite team, surprisingly, is Stanford football. And to his right is Parag, Vaish. I think I got that right. He's the director of mobile product management at StubHub. He's formerly been at NBC, Microsoft, and ESPN. And he's a fan of the LA Kings, the Seattle Seahawks, the Boston Red Sox, and the LA Lakers. And there's a story behind it. I was confused by all the different allegiances too. We don't have enough time. Okay, so we'll go for half hour, 40 minutes, and then we'll get some Q&A. So save your questions until the end, but tweet liberally. The hashtag is Sports and Tech. So there you go. All right, so I think pretty much every conversation about technology starts out this way. How's mobile affecting ticketing? How's mobile affecting your business? I hate it when people say go down the line, so don't do that. Whoever feels the most passionately about this is going to start.
Hello? 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 All right, I got it. We're good. Sorry about that. Well, first of all, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me on the panel. The question about mobile and how it's affecting our business, I think, again, my position at Stanford, I'm responsible for trying to sell as many tickets to our events as possible and for providing a good experience to all of our customers while they're doing so. And we, as you can imagine with most things, in terms of consumer web ticketing, increasingly is trending in the mobile direction, as the fellow panelists will talk about. We think about our customer base through a lens where we really think about the demographics of our supporters. Increasingly, as we are becoming more reliant on recent grads, people in the Valley who have experience using really good consumer web products, the expectations that they have that will transfer over to ticketing are very high. When we think about who our supporters of the future are going to be, it's increasingly young, tech-savvy, mobile-fluent individuals, and the demand for this a really good mobile experience in ticketing, both buying a ticket and using a ticket, is significant, it's growing, and it's an area where there seems to be a lot of opportunity for innovation. The partners that we work with, StubHub being one of them, are getting pretty good at this, but the appetite is clearly growing, especially at our events. We have recently been able to accept mobile barcodes as a way of gaining entry to the event, but there's still a lot of room to grow.
This is something we've been monitoring closely, like I'm sure most people in this room, and it's been really interesting when you're going through a sea change in technology and you're consciously aware that there is this change going on. And so it first started with just traffic patterns and seeing what % of traffic at any given time was coming from mobile versus desktop. And I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Liftopia, but we're a pretty traditional desktop online marketplace, kind of in the mold of an Expedia. We align supply and demand and apply revenue management pricing. So last year about 5% total of our bookings came through mobile, which included our app. It's not a huge number, probably between 10 and 15% of our total traffic. This year, and for clarity, I recently left Liftopia, as Michael said, so all of my data is only through December, but about 30% of our traffic was coming through mobile this year. But still, the overall conversion rates weren't quite as high as what we're seeing on desktop. And so we're sort of in this process of trying to figure out exactly how people are consuming mobile content versus our desktop content, and then how they're interacting. Whether, we know that about 50% of our customers coming through email are opening an email on their mobile phones, which is pretty much in line with what we anecdotally as consumers were all seeing within our company. But it wasn't necessarily leading to bookings, but then at the same time, direct bookings were going up substantially. So are those the same people or not? These are some of the challenges with analytics right now. But we are seeing the trend, and the interesting thing though is that conversion rate is still down compared to traffic numbers.
So StubHub is in the ticket business, obviously. So the question about how does mobile affect the ticketing space? So it affects us tremendously in a couple of ways. I'll be really crisp on my answers because I really want to hear your questions more importantly. By the way, I have 2 tickets to something to give away today. So depending on your question and how tough it is, somebody's going to get some tickets tonight. Might be a playoff game, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, so the first is how fans discover events. So if you think about a mobile device, you're out, you're using location-based services, you're indicating preferences of some sort to folks like us, and we can surface information to you so you can discover the events that are relevant to who you are, where you are. Next is the in-venue activity. So your mobile phone is presumably the only device you have on you. We have seen those people who have iPads in those front row of the concerts. That's really unusual to me, but mostly people have iPhones or Android devices. And you can do interesting things at the venue that you can't do without having a device there. You can go back 15 years or so. So you can do chatting, you can tweet, you can play along with a game-style thing with the content that you're watching. Lastly, and probably most importantly, is the mobile entry. As Kevin said, digital ticketing enables last-minute ticket sales. It enables you to not have to go pick up a ticket from some guy you bought tickets from on Craigslist. It's a game changer, and folks like StubHub, we're dependent upon the venues to be able to read the barcodes and view the tickets that are on the phone to gain access. So it's a fundamental game changer for StubHub, and we've been pretty aggressive over the last year in moving towards being a mobile-first company.
Yeah, while we're sort of sticking with mobile for a second, so we've talked a lot of sort of like how mobile affects sort of the front-end user experience, but there's obviously this whole new data set of like, all right, when are people making those purchases, what time, what location, etc. Have you guys started to look into that, and has that started to sort of impact other parts of your business?
Yeah, I'll take that first. So, as you'd imagine, people buy later than they used to because of mobile devices. So there's a higher percentage of transactions in the last 24 hours, potentially in the last 5 hours. So that's the first notable change, is that the shifting pattern of transacting later. The things that we can do, so we have a product that we call price alerts. So basically, because we're a marketplace, we don't have any of our own ticket inventory. We allow for sellers to sell tickets at whatever price they want and buyers to choose to buy whatever they want. Prices are constantly fluctuating. And so we've enabled a technology that allows for people to be notified when their price point is hit. So if you want a certain section, a certain game, at a certain price point, you can get a push notification of when that ticket becomes available to you. That's an intersection of our business model and technology that is another game changer for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think you were starting to get into kind of, I see it, there sort of being like two kind of really like critical sort of changes in ticketing over the last couple years. That's one, and I think what you're talking about in the other is this sort of advent of dynamic pricing, or proliferation of dynamic pricing, which has obviously been, in certain other industries, airlines for a little bit longer than it has been in sports. I guess I've got sort of a number of kind of questions up through that, but I guess sort of the first one is, what's the impact kind of been on your business? And the biggest challenge for me about dynamic pricing is sort of the consumer education that goes on with it. Sort of how have you thought about that? And I mean, I know we can get into like some of the stuff Stanford specifically has done that a bit too.
So that's a great question. Pricing is really interesting. We were talking before about how ticketing, there's a bunch of little mini markets, and it's pretty interesting to try to figure out how to do it. So dynamic pricing in sports is obviously a more recent development than it is in some other businesses like airlines. There's been a number of different recent developments in how people have been trying to do dynamic pricing. We implemented a reverse auction structure for selling single game football tickets in the summer. And we did this by actually, we established a starting price that we thought would represent the highest price that a small quantity of people would be willing to pay. We announced that the tickets were going on sale at that price, and we also announced on subsequent days that the price would be declining. We pre-announced this transparently, assuming that there was supply left. So let's say on August 1st, the ticket was $100. We would say, okay, on August 3rd, the same ticket is going to be 90, and then on August 5th, it'll be 80, if supply is available. And we found that, per the customer education point, that this schedule of price declines, that we were trying to really map the demand curve, customers really understood it, and we found that people that were willing to pay the premium paid the premium. People that wanted to wait and pay at a price that was closer to the clearing price were able to wait and do that. We find that there's a lot of consumer confusion when people, in sports at least, implement these dynamic pricing structures that aren't really based on anything. Like there's supply-based dynamic pricing and then there's demand-based dynamic pricing. A lot of what happens is a ticket will go on sale, the quantity is going down, so that the sports team will decide, okay, we're going to raise the price in response to the quantity going down. That's pretty confusing to customers, and there was some backlash at some colleges about how they did it. We like our reverse auction model. It really helped us maximize revenue. But it's interesting to follow this. I don't think it's a mix of kind of behavioral economics and trying to figure out how to. There's some social psychology involved as well.
I love this question. I love this question. This is exactly what Liftopia was built on. This is our DNA. And so having worked at Outlier, we were seeing firsthand what dynamic pricing was doing to unlock the airline industry and the hotel industry and the rental car industry and the cruise industry. And those really were the first adopters was the online travel space in a huge multi-billion dollar industry. And we've all seen the case studies, right? It was very apparent. But, when you really kind of peel it back, it really comes down to anything with perishable inventory, the model makes sense, right? Like whether it's an airline seat or a ticket for the Rose Bowl or a concert next Thursday, if you don't sell that ticket, you'll never be able to resell it. And so, then it comes down to what is the perceived value of that specific unit of inventory. And if you do not have dynamic pricing, then everything's static, right? And that creates inefficiencies in the marketplace, and that's why secondary markets like StubHub can exist, or Craigslist or whatever, because the primary sellers have gotten the pricing wrong. And so, on the one end, you'll get scalpers who will go and knowing that, holy shit, like I can get tickets for $50 and sell them for $300. And you have people that exploit that. Or we have the other end where it's just priced too high and then people are just running the market at the last minute. So, what I believe is we're going to see the same trends that we saw in online travel. So it first started with the secondary marketplaces, so the Expedias and the Travelocities and the Orricks of the world. They kind of over-indexed, put their suppliers through a little bit too much pain, and then there was sort of a pendulum swing back. Now the suppliers created the capabilities to sell their own inventory dynamically. We're doing it at Liftopia, skiing. It doesn't make sense if a lift ticket is $100 every single day of the season if it hasn't snowed in 3 weeks. If it's a Wednesday versus a Saturday, if the price of gas just went up to $5 a gallon, there's an infinite number of variables that impact the demand for any given day, and the price needs to reflect that. And we're starting to see it now with ticketing and in the sports space. I loved it when the Giants did it, and they were changing pricing based off of who was pitching. That's great, because I know as a consumer, as a fan, that, I'm going to decide which games I want to go to. I have a finite number of I got 2 little kids at home. I can only get a hall pass so many times. I got a finite number of games I'm going to be able to make it to. I want to make them count. And I don't want to pay the exact same price, if Zito's pitching against the Padres, or whatever. So all of this makes sense. And then what's really great is it's all powered by data, right? And it's all machine learnable. Like, we can get smarter as time goes on, so you can create these microsections within the stadium. Maybe when the Padres come into town and it's not a big draw, bleacher seats go down, premium seats go up, or it's inverse, and you can actually start doing it by a section. So I think it's incredibly exciting as to what it's going to unlock.
So just to interrupt before we get to Parag. So just not to be too controversial, but if you think the StubHubs of the world, whether StubHub or other secondary marketplaces, really kind of feasted on that inefficiency in whatever the first inning or the first half of this game, does that mean as people like you on the supplier side give them more tools? This is going to hurt the StubHubs of the world from there's less inefficiency to correct kind of way?
I think there's always going to be an inherent tension between suppliers and resellers. That's just a fact, right? And the suppliers that are going to, the resellers that are going to make it through are the ones that are sensitive to those needs and are able to provide tools or expertise in the marketplace that the suppliers themselves can't do, which is why Expedia still exists right now, and why StubHub with its mobile capabilities, as it gets bigger into access, things like that, working directly with the suppliers. There will absolutely be a space for that, but at the same time, I think we'll only be cognizant that as the tools get better and more available and more accessible, the suppliers are going to go and try and take back a little bit more of their share, thinking that they can do it themselves.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the secondary markets provide us with valuable data that we use as part of our regression analysis for how to price our tickets on a primary basis, right? Like, we can have a bunch of variables that we put in a regression to figure out what we think a game's going to be worth. The secondary market kind of tells the tale of what it actually is worth at a particular point in time, and that's helpful information for us on the front end as we go. It's kind of like a parallel market that we really follow closely. The comment about the Rose Bowl was made. The Rose Bowl is a good example this year. The Rose Bowl obviously is a very traditional game. They don't do any kind of dynamic pricing, and the market was crazy inefficient. There was extreme demand for the tickets. They were selling for multiples of their face value on StubHub, and if we were able to modify pricing and price dynamically, we would have been able to manage that a little more effectively than we did.
Yeah, so I think that to the question about pricing and dynamics, there's I think 2 answers. So one is I'll get to what these guys are talking about, the secondary market, but we are a dynamic market by nature, right? The prices are constantly changing, as I said. We're looking to take that to the next step, and dynamic pricing in my book would be when a seller indicates their price range that they're willing to sell this ticket at. Not the single price, but but willing to take between $50 and $75. And when a buyer comes along and indicates their preference, then a match is made, right? We're part of eBay, so we have some intelligence on how that sort of matching of a market works for best offer type technology. And so that's something where I think StubHub should go. I have the ability to influence it. I'm relatively new to StubHub, so I think it's a miss that we've not done something like that in the past. Now to the point about the secondary market and the efficiency in the primary, I think there's a fair amount of merit to the idea that as the primary gets better about pricing, then folks will buy. The difference is that buyers want to buy as late as possible. Right? They feel like they can get a better deal, or they can feel like they can get better seats, better locations that they want, and that will continue to flourish the secondary market. The idea of changing pricing along the way for a primary, you kind of can't do that because you want to sell your tickets far enough in advance of game time. Primaries are, I can't imagine a scenario where you'd be thrilled about waiting till the last 2 hours to sell 90% of your inventory, not knowing how many people are coming. You got to price it efficiently to make sure you do the volumes are out there.
Yeah, and also the products are different, right? You're selling single game tickets. We're trying to sell subscriptions and season tickets. As long as those still exist, we debate all the time about how much longer season tickets actually going to exist because you're not actually buying the games, you're buying the subscription. But so the secondary market will always exist, no matter how good we get at pricing on a game-by-game basis, because we are going to sell subscriptions and people will buy them because that subscription is going to get them something else, whether it's postseason ticket access. Even though they don't want to go to every single game, they will still try to sell single games on the secondary market, which we're okay with them doing that.
I think the key to revenue management and dynamic pricing lies in advanced purchase, right? Because from the supplier's perspective, you do want to lock in as much visitation as you can prior to that event. So yeah, so long as there will be that last minute people who need to unload tickets, whatever, there will be the secondary market for that. But from the supplier's perspective, it's about selling as much inventory as you can as far in advance, which really means giving an incentive to consumers to buy. The reverse auction model is really interesting, and it's not one that I've really seen in action at that kind of scale. And if it works, that's awesome. What we do at Liftopia is we'll have, for any given day, we'll have 10 different price points. And this is skiing, it's not like one room type versus another room type. It's trying to create an urgency to purchase so that a customer, just like with a flight where there's finite capacity, oh shit, if I don't buy this right now, there's only 4 tickets remaining, and if I come back tomorrow, it's going to be gone, or it's going to be at a higher price. And our goal on behalf of our suppliers is to extend the booking window as far out as we can. And that's been like a success metric for how we run our business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I probably do want to get back to the subscription and what all that means and value. But before we do that, so we sort of probably hit what I sort of, as the person least involved in the space on a day-to-day basis, see as kind of the two kind of exciting things going on. What are the other real exciting things that are getting you guys kind of revved up or engaged in the ticketing business right now?
I'm fired up about all the in-venue activities that you can undertake, and they're not wide right now, but Kevin and I were talking about Wi-Fi connectivity at venues, and it's still not great, honestly. Some venues are great, his is great. When that is great universally, there's so many exciting things you can do. Both Kevin and I are associated to a company that does delivery of food, concession stand materials, product, beers, hot dogs, etc., to your seat or to a pickup location. That's interesting. That's in a venue that solves a problem. It sucks to wait 30 minutes for a beer when the game's only 2.5 hours. I mentioned gaming earlier, the idea that you can play along. These are technologies that sort of change the experience, right? Enhance it, give you new value. Really fired up that there's so much possibility there. You're probably familiar all with iBeacon and the potential that exists. We're seeing some MLB teams starting to test it. Tremendous opportunity there.
Oh, by the way, iBeacon, I'm probably not the best person to find it, but basically like low-powered Bluetooth with the new phones, and it'll be used in a lot of sort of retailing type examples in the future.
Yeah, I think the in-venue activity, the possibilities are there for sure. It makes complete sense. It's an experience where there's a bunch of people watching an event, there's a lot of downtime, there's a device, and in the future there'll be universal connectivity. I think that there's a huge opportunity for folks out there thinking about this. Nobody really has quite understood what the quote killer app is for in-venue experience yet. I think there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of ideas. We've tried some stuff. We've tried replays on a mobile website. We've tried live stats. Mobile food ordering is one thing. You hear about the 49ers trying some stuff as well. I think what actually will add value to the person in the stadium is different than what people think is going to add value. And I don't think there hasn't been a big enough sample size nor enough testing to really figure that out yet. And we're excited about some entrepreneur figuring it out and us being able to benefit from it. But it is interesting to follow that, and connectivity is the first building block, and it's a crazy difficult engineering challenge. We struggled with it for a couple of years, and we finally think we've got it figured out. And I see Jason back there from the Pac-12, but the Pac-12 has recently done a deal with AT&T to make sure that all the venues in the conference are connected, which is a big step in the right direction.
One of the sort of questions I had that it's definitely not the killer app yet, but there's probably a startup in this room. There's 4 or 5 startups doing it. That plays into the sort of last minute stadium connectivity thing. Is I think the Warriors do one, and there's a couple other teams that are doing these upgrade your seat in stadium. Is that interesting to you guys? I could see that both from sort of a StubHub and a stadium perspective.
Yeah, we use Pogo Seat right now in basketball on an experimental basis, and it's more of a we have found that it's still a process that fans are not familiar with. Like it's just a novel thing. The idea that you can buy a ticket to a game that you're already at, when you're already at it, you can move down, and so once people get trained on it, I think there's going to be more value there. We do it to provide some additional value to our Upper Bowl basketball season ticket holders. So then we have the no-shows in the sort of expensive rich people seats. We can move them down there. They feel good about it. But it'll be interesting to see how that follows. I'm not sure how it impacts you guys.
Yeah, I think, so we've been testing it on a manual basis, so the idea of upgrading fans to better seats. We have a fan reward program at StubHub, and so as you accumulate points and have number of purchases and stature, we'll actually pluck off the buyers who are the best customers of certain games and upgrade them, give them a call beforehand. To your point about it's not familiar to fans just yet. When we call fans and ask them or tell them they've been upgraded to a suite, they first think it's some kind of a prank call or some kind of a scam. So we actually have to get through the hurdle of we're actually StubHub, this is legitimate, and you're being upgraded to the suite, no problem. So there is an education process. But so what we're learning is that fans love it. They have a fantastic time. They appreciate the benefit for what they've earned with us, and see that paid back to them. Now, scalably doing it and doing it in a way that drives revenue and value for the customer, that is interesting to us. The difference for StubHub right now is that we're a secondary market, so we've sold someone else's tickets to a buyer, right? And so seller has been paid and buyer has the tickets. If we upgrade the buyer to a new set of seats, that's a new seller's tickets, right? So who pays for that? So it's a different economic position for StubHub. Now, if we get into selling primary inventory or work with partners like Pacquiao and others, we can do some interesting things with unsold inventory, and that's where we're at next.
Got it. So we've sort of alluded to a bunch of the things that are sort of starting with permanent ticketing. Let's say 5 or 10 years out, or however you want to answer this. I'm sure you guys sort of think about this, like, how's ticketing going to look? Like, I mean, clearly it's not going to be paper, but beyond that, what are the things that we're going to see that we don't see now? Is there stuff that we haven't covered?
I mean, it's obviously so speculative when you look at that time horizon. The near-term obvious thing would be wearable devices. You have some variation of a digital watch that has a barcode, and you can walk right in. After that, who knows? I mean, there's probably some fingerprint scanning thing that you don't even need a ticket, you don't even need a watch, and you just walk right in and they know who you are. That's probably the 10-year side.
Right, and we sort of talked about, you alluded to kind of like an unbundling of these sort of subscription type products. Is that something else?
Yeah, I mean, obviously can't predict the future, but we have seen at Stanford, and this might be a little bit unique to the our fan base, but we've seen at Stanford extremely robust demand for the premium games and very, very little demand for less than median games. And this is borne out in the resale data and what the transactions are happening on secondary. The multiple of say resale price for the good game versus an average or below average game. So a subscription needs to go beyond just tickets to all the games in the season. There has to be some other membership benefits associated with it. The NFL has moved in this direction this year by offering, I think if you're an NFL season ticket holder, you get like free access to some cool thing in Madden. I'm not a gamer myself, but I think they've done that. So they've added some perks to being a season ticket holder that go beyond just the tickets to the game. And I think that that's, in order for clubs or franchises to maintain the subscription model, in the face of varying sort of market value of each game, there's going to have to be additional things thrown in, and that's something that we're thinking about as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
I think right now there's just an inherent disconnect between the purchase experience and the redemption experience, and that to me is what needs to be smoothed out. And whether it's mobile, whether it's wearable, whatever it is, we've started dealing with it at Liftopia. It's tricky because you're dealing with the elements, you're dealing with below freezing weather, children who don't have smartphones, things like that, people who don't have fingerprints. These are real issues, right? So it makes it tricky, but clearly that is a space that is yet to be, that is really yet to be exploited. I think there's going to be a wave of innovation in that.
The point about the redemption experience, you have to think about it demographically as well. Like we're all we can understand some of these tech products and we like them. Our customer base is largely not us, right? We have a tremendous number of traditionalists, is the name of the segment that we call them, but they're graduates of 40 years ago or more, and we have a number of families with kids that don't have smartphones. So really, if we had a great wearable product or whatever, that would only apply to a minority of our current customer base. Now, it's a very important one because they're the ones that are going to be our primary supporters in a number of years. But I think that sort of tempers the pace of innovation in terms of how these things can be practically applied.
Interesting. So one of the sort of things we've talked about a bunch of technologies that are, in the Stanford football, I'd say is a pretty mainstream event. But there's also sort of these kind of areas for growth, and one of the areas for growth that seems like it's been pretty prominent, taking the last few years, has been sort of the long tail. Eventbrite's obviously a company people talk about going public. Liftopia, I guess it's at least a different kind of marketplace than was really sort of exploited and kind of value was captured before. And even for Stanford, I think of probably outside of your basketball and football, you have some sort of, less popular events. How do you guys think about addressing that market? And is those product necessary to address that market different than the sort of mainstream product for a football game?
Yeah, so StubHub bought a company a few years ago called Z-Events. This was the long tail of events, and it's got millions of events that are the dog show and the fair, all kinds of fun stuff. To your question, the biggest challenge that we face is how do we digest all of those events into, in the case of mobile, a very small screen, very tiny real estate, and still make it relevant for you. I mean, if you go from a couple 100,000 events to a couple million events, it could get overwhelming for consumers very fast. And so if we're not doing a good job of using the power of mobile with location and the information we know about you, your iTunes library, things like that, to surface the right events and tickets to you, it actually will just work against us. And so we haven't yet digested that Z-Events inventory into the core StubHub mobile product. For that reason, we need to figure out how to actually display all this rich information. Now, once we do that, then you're dealing with recommendations at a totally different level. It's Saturday at 10 a.m., you're looking for a very different thing than Friday at 11 p.m. And the ability for us to recommend something to you that matches your needs is critical for us to make that valuable for you.
The question about the long tail and services that deal with smaller events that maybe aren't reserved seating events. Eventbrite's a good example to my knowledge, it's not reserved seat venues that they're in. Maybe I think they're just starting that. But I started sort of overseeing ticketing a few years ago, and I quickly learned that it's actually much more complicated than I thought it was. Like I walked in the first couple of weeks and said, all right, we got to make this as easy as buying a book on Amazon. But when you buy a book on Amazon, you click, and somewhere in the warehouse, they pull a book off the shelf and they send it to you. It doesn't matter if they pick the book on the top or the next book down or the next book down, it's all the same book. In ticketing, when you're assigning a ticket to a specific game, in a specific row, in a specific seat, for a specific sport, in a specific season, it's very unique. It's a unique thing. The act of managing that inventory on the back end, it turns out to be much more complicated than I thought it was. I think that's a pretty big barrier for entry for some of these smaller startups that do ticketing. They have great user experiences, great front ends, but the back end is actually pretty hard to replicate. It takes a lot of resources to replicate. So I think that's tricky. I think, and I'm only talking, of course, about big events, big football stadiums that are large reserved seat venues. So hopefully somebody comes along and can do all the complicated back end stuff with a better front end experience for the user.
So we had to do this at Liftopia from scratch. So when we started, we launched in October of 2006, and there was no such thing as going onto Squad's website and buying a single day pass, let alone a date-specific, variably priced single day pass with a barcode that gets you direct access. And we had to build it. It was incredibly challenging. And the only way we were able to do it was by, again, working directly with the suppliers. And I think that's one of the tricky things that people who enter the ticketing space don't often recognize is you can very easily, Groupon is, I think, the classic case study of this, about over-indexing on the consumer side at the expense of the suppliers. And you can have some quick success, but it will flame out. It will inevitably burn out, especially if you're in a marketplace where we are reliant. You need to have that balance between both the supply side and the demand side. And so I think if it comes to innovation and creating the back-end infrastructure, there is no way to go about it without working directly with the supplier.
That makes total sense. To sort of get to this sort of biz devy question, and I think the Stanford and the StubHubs of the world, there are sort of there are a lot of sort of Stanford big event venue owner type places, and there's a lot of startups in this room that would benefit from distribution, benefit partnerships, and a lot of them have somewhat interesting technology. If I'm a startup, how do I work with Stanford Athletics? How do I work with the StubHub?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is, so I've been at startups, and I know how difficult it is. So I've got a soft spot in my heart for startups, first of all, where I'm probably always going to take your call and hear you out. But I really need to see very clearly what you can do for StubHub pretty quickly and visually. So if you can illustrate that some way and show how it would work and how it delivers new value to StubHub or to the fans or to the ecosystem, I need that real fast. We're part of eBay, so the path towards an acquisition is a pretty long one. It starts with being able to try and use the product that a startup is bringing to us. So we have to actually use the code. We have to see it working in a live environment before we can start using the word acquisition. So it doesn't jump right to that stage. So I'd say keep that in mind as well. It kind of goes hand in hand with the first point of we got to see how this value would be created. So I need to know that pretty quickly.
We're in much the same boat. Obviously, being at Stanford, it's a robust ecosystem for startups, and we are approached on a regular basis, and we like that. I will say that in addition to demonstrating value right away, we are a university, and the point of our existence is to make things better and to make contributions. And in athletics, we think about ourselves as contributors to the sports business at large. So, we want things to have value for Stanford specifically, but we also kind of function as a mini laboratory for sports business ideas and products in general, when possible. Sometimes it's not possible for us to accommodate that, but it is something that we are interested in doing. So, at the risk of inviting multiple pitches from all of you in the audience, please feel free to definitely come talk to us. We do consider it part of our organization's responsibility to serve as an incubator, as it were, for these types of things.
Guys, get your questions ready. We're gonna get questions in a sec. And so you actually did this. You went and said, hey, Vail Valley, hey Vail Resorts, hey Squaw Valley. We are a startup. We probably at one point have no customers. What were the keys for you to sort of getting people who are not as probably familiar with Stanford athletics to partner with you?
Yeah, and Stanford athletics is it's an elite university in the tech hub of the world. And, that there's a level of sophistication built in there versus a Gunstock mountain in New Hampshire that's has a lockbox and doesn't even have a POS system. So it was hard. It was hard. We thought being in San Francisco, we were based in San Francisco. We wanted to be a tech startup, an online travel startup that happens to serve the ski industry, not move to Steamboat and be ski bums, trying to keep our lifestyle going. It was hard. We thought we'd start in Tahoe, and that the proximity to the Bay Area would mean that it would be a little bit easier for PICs. They would understand some of the principles that we're talking about. Like, we're talking very basic things like selling inventory on the internet, which they're like, the internet's just a fad. We tried that in the late 90s and it didn't work. All right. And so we didn't get any traction in Tahoe. We tried going to the big resorts like the Vails and the Whistlers and the Aspens of the world. They're like, who the F are you guys? Come back in 3 years. And that comes down to the question that when they're getting hit up at StubHub or getting hit up at Stanford, it really comes down to what are you going to do for us, right? And I think the easiest thing, and this took us a couple years to figure out, that the single best thing you can do for anyone is if they don't have it, is be a data play, right? You're going to be able to provide, for us, there's no advanced purchase in skis, so what we're able to do, all of our things are day specific. We can see consumer intent. So the way that ski resorts figure out how busy they're going to be on any given day is they actually look at their parking lot. No joke. They go out, they look at their parking lot, they see how full their parking lot is, and that's how they know how good or bad of a day it is. And what we're saying is hey guys, we can tell you how full your parking lot is going to be a week in advance, right? And so we're able to tell them search volume by day, average booking window, average price by state, just slice and dice the data, make it really interesting, make it compelling. Stuff that they have no other way of getting. We're a marketplace, we have a multiplier effect, so we're able to aggregate data across their competitors, create comp sets for them, all this stuff that they would have no way of getting. And once they started seeing that, even though they don't know how to use a spreadsheet, you distill it down into something that's easily digestible. There's no way they can't work with you.
That's great. Okay, questions from all of you guys. Back left. I think we have a microphone, but yelling works too.
I'm loud, I won't need a mic. So this actually ties into what Ron was just talking about with being able to tell the resorts, hey, I can tell you a week in advance or a couple days in advance what your parking lot's going to look like. And this probably applies more to StubHub as well. But with big data being the buzzword that it is right now, what are you guys looking at as far as analytics or forecasting to be able to say, hey, traditionally, this is what it's looked like for you in March, or this is what these events have done in the past when the Red Sox come to town, or the Cubs come to town, to do the forecasting going forward for people, using it as a data play?
I think I'll describe one thing that we have live today. So we give sellers pricing guidance on how to efficiently price their tickets. So as you put in the section and the row, we'll display on the next screen the range in which the price of the ticket should sell. So we'll give you the low, the high, and the median for that section. That's beneficial to the seller because it increases the probability the ticket will sell, given the price guidance that we're offering. It's also worthwhile for us because it's not a great experience if you list a ticket for sale and it doesn't actually sell. So you're actually getting a transaction to be completed. So in probably the most visible way, we're using data to guide pricing decisions, which influences both the seller and the buyer. For prediction purposes, we haven't done anything yet. We have a mountain of data, and my engineering manager is back here, so we're working together to figure out what we can bring to the fan for the true value. And that's really the lens in which we look at things, is what's the value that we can bring to the fan. There are not many other organizations in the sports and entertainment world who are advocates of the fan. In the case of Kevin, the Stanford, they absolutely are, because they are the team owner and the inherently interested in that. But Ticketmaster doesn't really care about fans, that I can tell. I don't know, anybody else believe they do? No, right? So we're advocates of the fan. So to the extent that we can use data to do so, that's what we will.
We see pricing. I don't even like the big data catchphrase being thrown around. It's like Web 2.0 a bunch of years ago. It's just right. It's just lingo, but it's really just data, right? It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be inaccessible. It's just data. And a lot of when you're not doing revenue management, when you're not doing dynamic pricing, you may or may not be looking at the data, but chances are you don't have it because you don't have the mechanism in place to capture it, which is like efficiency, purchase rate by price point, all the different ways that you slice and dice it. For us, we always did it kind of similar to what it sounds like StubHub does. Is we have our proactive pricing and then our reactive pricing. The proactive pricing is we take 8 years worth of aggregated data by region, by resort, by comp set, map it to day of week, put 10 price points in place per day across the entire season. We do this in like July. And then there's the reactive stuff, that's done in a vacuum, that's an academic study, and then it's based on like the snow and the economy and the price of gas and everything else that impacts visitation once you're live, once you're in season. And focusing on the two of those, I don't know if you guys have picked up on this, but Liftopia built its reputation on being supplier friendly, first and foremost, because we are a supply constrained marketplace. There's no shortage of people who want to buy cheap lift tickets online. No one wants to pay $119 to go ski for a day. Everyone's always looking for ski deals. And the problem is, how do you get access to unique inventory? You have to provide something that, again, the suppliers can in no way live without and no one else can match. So pricing guidance plays a huge part in that.
Okay, next question. One of you two guys, you guys can fight over it.
I probably don't need it, but all right. So you guys left off, you started talking about the inefficiencies on the supplier side of selling tickets and how that's being solved today with dynamic pricing. On the reseller side, I feel like you glossed over the fact that, for example, the NFL now has its own reselling setup. So what stops some of these big sports organizations from basically walling off their garden and, sadly cutting you guys out? I can understand the smaller, venues may still need that aggregation of all the groups, but the larger ones, what stops them from running away with it?
Nothing will, right? They will get there. There's too much money behind it. It's the exact same trend that we saw in online travel. They want to own their own distribution, right? And you can make a case. You can add value. You can make a case. But right now, it's just that the capabilities aren't in place to open up the Liftopia playbook for all the entrepreneurs in there. We saw this coming in our space. We knew that we were going to get too big as a centralized marketplace where our suppliers are going to start feeling really uncomfortable pretty soon that we're making up 20, 30, 40% of their total skier days coming through a centralized marketplace that they don't control. So we created a private label, and we gave them the tools that we knew they were going to start building soon. We just proactively gave it to them. We chopped margin. Now they're selling all their tickets, and this is the goal. 100% of the ski lift tickets we want to be sold through the Liftopia platform. We don't care if they come through the centralized marketplace or through their own site. That's powered by us.
So nothing was glossed over, first of all. In regards to NFL and other, frankly, organizations that have their own reselling organizations. So NFL, NHL, NBA, or aligned with Ticketmaster for reselling products. The market will decide for itself what's the most efficient pricing. Now, what the channel of preference for buyers is something that today people who don't like Ticketmaster don't go to Ticketmaster, or they really despise the experience. In the long run, what this gentleman said is, may take hold, right? Whatever the market demands will prove positive. So for StubHub, there are a couple things that we're doing. So first of all is we're getting into the primary ticketing inventory space, right? So we're going to have both primary and secondary for sale. Second is, to the question earlier, the gentleman I mentioned, StubHub is attempting to be fan-friendly and fan-focused. So we're the only organization that has a rewards program. As you accumulate purchases with us, you get rewarded with benefits. It's upgrades, it's points towards future tickets, whatever it is that we offer. there's not too many folks who are doing that. And so that creates this affinity to want to continue to purchase with StubHub and maintain that profile, that status, or those once in a lifetime activities that we can offer. So we've put people to throw out the first pitch at games, right? That kind of thing that's new value that actually they don't put a price on it, right? And so that draws people to want to purchase with StubHub. We've seen the broker community be fairly adverse to the Ticketmaster offering. Their fear is that they reveal the pricing of their tickets or the true value of the marketplace before Ticketmaster has actually released all their inventory. And so if Ticketmaster adjusts the inventory pricing to be at market rate, presumably higher, then they've revealed their hand. So brokers don't want to list their ticket inventory on Ticketmaster because of that. So the ecosystem may not actually take hold if that continues, right? The companies that are most at risk of this future model are actually the brokers, honestly, right? Because they're holding these tickets that they've bought or acquired from some other place in which the primary, via Ticketmaster, or via StubHub as a primary or secondary, and through mobile and digital ticketing, would be able to sell directly to consumers. And so that's the group that probably has the biggest risk, to that model that you're describing, what the future state looks like. But I think it's about how companies evolve and compete. And so I give you a couple examples how we are going to compete and going to continue to win.
Yeah, we're not trying to cut out secondary market activity. We're trying to take back some of the margin that the brokers have been making. And dynamic pricing is a way for us to do that, as is managing the timing by which we release inventory, which was alluded to in Parag's answer. It'll be interesting to see how it develops. I mean, college is a little different. There's some things that we do in college that are different than they do in the NFL. But our goal is, when we do dynamic pricing, is to take back some of the margin that brokers are making.
Next question. We'll do the other guy in the back. Back right.
Hello. I guess it's a bit of a follow-up to that one in terms of cutting the secondary market out. There's a lot of move towards, in this more entertainment, the paperless ticket, the non-transferable ticket, which is it's the worst thing to happen to ticket buyers ever. But how do you, as a ticket seller, what you feel the advantages and what might be the drawbacks of that in terms of the marketplace?
And so, sorry, your question is specifically about the paperless ticket, like the credit card entry?
Yeah, the paperless credit card entry or the non-transferable ticket, once you bought it, you're stuck with it.
Yeah, I think the world or customers have spoken and said that really sucks, right? So people have multiple credit cards, people buy for other people, and you arrive and you're not sure which credit card you used. Your friend is not at the venue yet, and so you can't get in. All the things on the reasons why it sucks will be the reason why that won't take off. There'll be a backlash. There already is a backlash, and people just hate that experience. And we're in a very lucky place, speaking of the Bay Area, with the economy healthy. That's not the case everywhere. And so teams and venues in different parts of the country, and frankly different parts of the world, just want to get people in the door. They want them to buy the extra concession stand items. They want to have a great time, so they tell their friends and come back. And creating this extra hurdle or pain point is not necessarily in their interest.
I think it comes down to a safety measure. So at Liftopia, for example, all of our tickets are name specific because in ski there's a huge problem with not the secondary market, but selling in parking lots, and I guess Craigslist to an extent. And so one of the ways that we're able to acquire unique inventory that no one else gets is because of the fact we make our customers jump through these hoops. Now there are instances in which we'll change the names or whatever, do a hardship, things like that. But really then the bigger question is it's about pricing segmentation, and that the band of price, I don't know how much this happens in sports, for example. It happens in travel a lot with the Living Social Escapes or Hotel Tonight, things like that, versus Expedia, with Liftopia versus REI. Right, and the difference in price comes down to the difference in the restrictions around the ticket itself, and that can be a pretty good roadmap to help. There's just we're talking about a lot of different things. One of it is revenue management. One of it is also just distribution trends and like what is the optimal number of distribution channels with which to focus on. I don't think any of us are in agreement that like anyone's going to own 100% of the distribution. It's just too inefficient. You're never going to align all of the supply with all of the demand out there, so you do have to rely on it. And then it comes down to like how do you price it efficiently within each channel. It comes down to the level of restriction. The credit card stuff just sounds like it sucks across the board and probably shouldn't have a place. But things like having name-specific inventory, I think that there is a place for that. Or non-refundable tickets.
Any next question? All the way in the back.
Which gateway service do you guys like the best, and which ones do users seem to respond to most?
You like payment gateway?
Yeah, payment gateway or like access on-site?
The gateway. What type of gateway services? Like PayPal, .net, or what type of payment system do people seem to be responding to?
We generally like PayPal. We haven't really dipped our toe in the water or anything other than PayPal.
We switched to Braintree recently. It's been great. Very happy with it. It helps with mobile.
I have my own startup, and to me, a lot of that's commoditized personally. Next question. Rick.
Two data points. One, in terms of managing ticket sales, 3 out of the 4 playoff games last weekend did not sell out. I mean, they pretended to. You can understand Green Bay, but Indianapolis was indoors. What does that say about sales, pricing, and NFL's ticket management? The second data point, the big news at CES this week is UHD, which is the next generation of television. And considering what the weather was like at the football games, in a few years, will anybody want to go there?
I think it's a tricky issue. We at Stanford have noticed in the last few years that, especially in the non-traditionalist fan groups, a little younger than the retirees that have followed us around for years, that the experience of going to the event is very social. It's on the short turnarounds like we saw in the NFL playoffs. It's hard for folks to have planned for it and have it become a social thing. We see this is difficult for us because of the changing kickoff times associated with our media contract. For anybody out there who's trying to figure out a big problem to solve in sports, how do you create differentiators in the experience of actually going to the venue or going to campus that makes somebody want to get off the couch and go? There's a lot of friction involved in turning the TV off, getting up, going, driving in there, sitting in traffic, paying for parking, lining up at the bathroom, maybe not having the best view of the game, having crappy cell phone service. There's a lot of friction involved in that, and increasingly people just don't want to deal with it. Thinking about how to create experiences at the venue that differentiate from the home experience is a big opportunity. It's interesting what's happened in the NFL. We had a similar situation with our Pac-12 championship game that we hosted last year. We played UCLA on a weekend, on a Saturday, and then we followed up by playing them again on the Friday, 6 days later, for the right to go to the Rose Bowl. And we had a very difficult time selling that ticket just because of the quick turnaround. And this is a prevalent thing throughout sports right now.
I think it comes down to inefficiency in pricing. Right? If there was demand there, they would be buying it.
But the goal, of course, it depends what the goal is, right? If you're trying to maximize revenue, maybe that price point.
And then it comes down to what metrics you're looking at. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, is the success metric average yield per ticket, or is it overall revenue? Do you factor in, in ski, 50% of revenue comes from on-mountain spend, right? The $12 hamburgers and $10 beers. I have to think it's somewhere along this. I don't know about 50%, but it's got to be pretty material. $60 sweatshirts and overpriced food and drinks and whatever. So then there's the question of just getting bodies in there to get that extra money out. I think I'm also there.
Yeah, I agree with everything that they said, so I won't repeat what they have, but the new information that I have is, so I used to work in the movie business, and this is back in '97. when VHS was going away, DVDs were taking hold, and the idea that, who's going to go to a movie theater, anymore, because flat screen TVs were starting to come out. And clearly, like as you mentioned with CBS, all the greatest devices are out there, and you can have, probably as great high quality sound at home as you can in the stadium. But there's something different about the live experience, and I think over time we've learned that the fear, the belief that technology will disrupt, still the idea of going with your buddies, drinking some beer, being in the parking lot, right, being fully immersed in the experience is necessary. Now, to your point about this past weekend, certainly all the elements, the weather, the pricing, things like that, but also the stadium sizes. These stadiums are getting huge, right? You look at some of these baseball stadiums in late August when their team is 20 games out of a playoff position, and there's like 2,000 people who've gone, and probably been donated those tickets, in fact, right? These stadiums are 60,000 seats still, right? So there's a little bit of a mismatch there that gets created from time to time. I think also in some cases with the teams this weekend, there's an expectation that they'll catch them in the next round.
All right, last two questions. Right here in front. Vest.
You talked about price optimization quite a bit. How do you think the deal proliferation, Groupons, living socials have affected kind of the negative downtrend, or at least the consumer sentiment of pricing? And how do you, StubHub, obviously you guys deal with that as well. Curious to hear your thoughts.
We face there's two different scenarios when figuring out, let's say, pricing for a football game. One is when demand exceeds supply, and the other one is when supply exceeds demand. So if there's scarcity in tickets, this Groupon, like the discount, none of that discounting stuff makes a difference for us. Obviously, we're trying to maximize revenue, and I alluded to how we do that earlier by trying to price at the top of the demand curve and then move down the demand curve over time. When supply exceeds demand, then we do start getting into some of these discounting situations. Frankly, how we think about Groupon is we think about it as a marketing opportunity. We reach a whole new set of people that ordinarily don't get exposed to Stanford football through Groupon. We do have been successful at Groupon from that standpoint, but it's at that point we're sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as revenue is concerned.
All right, last question. Center here. Right there.
You guys talked a little bit about dynamic pricing earlier, basically charging a different price given when you sell the ticket. What about price discrimination? Have you guys thought about how you might charge a different price to a particular user based on what you know about that user?
Orrick's gotten a lot of trouble for this. About 2 years ago, they were raising their prices for folks who were conducting searches on Macs versus PC. So price discrimination is a pretty scary thing. Like, chances are, like, if it gets out, there's going to be a backlash, and if you're worried about something getting out and there being a backlash against you, you probably shouldn't do it. Pretty good rule of thumb, I think. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, in StubHub case, there's no scenario that we would enable for different prices of the same product for the same for different people. Having said that, there's volume-based discounts, whether you're a seller or buyer. We do have a seller program where you charge a different fee if you sell at a high volume, but that's not a discrimination. That's a benefit, of having been a long-time customer or selling at a high volume rate. So.
Yeah, our price discrimination is in the form of how we carve up the stadium, right? So like if you're sitting on the midfield sections on the shady side, we understand who's trying to buy those tickets and we price accordingly. And also in our dynamic pricing scheme, I guess, I don't know if it's price discrimination, but if, let's say you're looking for 6 together, right? You're looking for 6 tickets together and the inventory is limited, you need to go shop earlier for those 6 if you want to find 6 together than if you're just looking for a pair. So we know that person's going to buy at a higher price, and that's a lot of what we capture on the sort of steep early part of the demand curve. I don't think those are necessarily price discrimination per se, but I'm trying to get at that.
But I mean, you guys do student pricing and alumni pricing for certain events as well.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. Maybe that is price discrimination. That's more in the student and alumni relations.
I think that the scenario you want to avoid is having the person sitting next to you tell you that they got the exact same ticket with the exact same level of restrictions for $20 cheaper. And you're sitting there saying, what the F? Right? And then that, whereas if it's like, yeah, I have a student ID or I'm a senior citizen, then it's explainable.
That's a legitimate point. At the game, if that happened, that is a concern. But if you and I are sitting at a game and or a concert, let's say we're going to Taylor Swift concert, and I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, okay, and the moment the ticket goes on sale, I'm definitely buying these Taylor Swift tickets because if they're sold out, what am I going to do? So I buy when the price is, if they're using our dynamic pricing scheme and they're smart, they would start the price high. And I would buy the first 10 minutes when the price is high, even though I know it's going to, if supply is available in an hour, it's going to go down 25. My conditions of purchase, that was the deal that I wanted to make. I made that deal. I guaranteed myself tickets at the time. It was worth it for me. I might be sitting next to you. You pay less money, but at the time, I made the deal that I thought was the right deal for me. So, but it's hard to reconcile that after the fact, I guess.
And that's not quite apples to apples. That's the scenario you want to avoid. It's the apples to apples price discrimination.
All right, great stuff. First of all, a big hand to our great panel. All right, before you get up, also a round of applause for our sponsor, Orrick, and our beer sponsor, Armstrong Brewing. All right, thanks again, everyone. We'll be back in March, and hang out and have a beer. Thanks.
Thank you.